Netflix has long since been a necessary evil in the world of entertainment. The moment you see something being a Netflix original, you already have a rough idea of what to expect from it, especially when it comes to their romance movies. But where I have to give them credit for is how they are at least trying to keep the animated TV show space somewhat afloat by putting out new stuff every now and then that ends up being really good. But don't misunderstand me, they're doing the absolute barest minimum in terms of getting these things out there. But where they really fumble the bag is how they almost never promote these shows and then go on to cancel them. And we're already seeing the long-term effects of this self-fulfilling prophecy. One season is all a show is ever guaranteed when it's on Netflix, no matter how good it may be. Like, I'm still here mourning the loss of Inside Job. So because of this, shows tend to put a lot into their season just in case they never get a second season, which, as you'd expect, brings a lot of problems in its storytelling. Enter Gentry, Chau vs the Underworld. A Netflix original beaming with a lot of style and potential, but is never quite able to stick its landing as it panics to get a good story out there before the eventual Netflix cancellation. If you haven't seen it yet, let me give you a brief rundown of what this show is about. Gentry, Chau vs the Underworld is a show that follows the life of Gentry, a girl born with supernatural fire powers that finds herself thrown back into the world of the supernatural when, on her 16th birthday, is forced to move back to Texas from Seoul by her great aunt Gugu, in order to protect and train her to master her powers and defeat the evil Mr. Cheng, who's after her life and those very powers. Moving back to Texas is hard on Gentry as she's constantly reminded of the time she accidentally set the town on fire 8 years ago, an event that traumatized her. Adding to the stress of dealing with the trauma of that day, she's also left to adjust to a new school while trying to act normal and keep her powers at bay, all while juggling new relationships and dealing with creatures from the underworld. The show has all the tropes you'd expect from a story about a teenager with superpowers reluctantly taking up the role that has been thrust upon them, which makes the show feel a bit familiar in the same vein as American Dragon or Juniper Lee, even having a love triangle thrown in there for good measure. But unlike those shows, it's not really an episodic series that has the characters engaging in self-contained supernatural adventures. Gentry, Chau has an overarching narrative that unfortunately isn't able to fully realize itself. The major problem the show has is in its pacing. For 13 episodes, the show crams a lot into it that, while it tries its best to be cohesive and entertaining enough for those 13 episodes, it falls apart the moment you really stop to think about it. The first 2 episodes alone come at you at such a breakneck speed that it takes a while to get acclimated to the characters and the settings. This hurts the show a lot as it makes it hard to emotionally connect with the characters when you aren't really given time to let scenes center around them sink. For example, in the first episode when Gentry is taken back to Texas to begin her training, we get a brief montage of her getting acclimated to her powers before Gugu thinks she is ready to take on the powerful Mogwai that has lived for centuries. Irresponsible? Yes. And it's that irresponsibility that leads to Gugu's death in episode 1. This is something that's supposed to be a pretty shocking and emotional scene, but it doesn't really do much for anyone watching because the pacing didn't let you connect to her. And to make the blow even less impactful, she comes back as a ghost almost immediately and remains that way for the remainder of the show. There are several other cases like this that always left me with a "that's it" feeling as I watched. You can clearly tell they wanted these scenes to be a lot more emotional than intended, but they never do hit the highs they were expecting. The pacing also causes a lot of the other characters and their arcs to fall short too. Gentry, Chau vs the Underworld houses a pretty diverse cast that unfortunately are never able to truly shine because they are either left to be off-screen or have very little to do. There's Michael, Gentry's childhood friend and budding love interest who I can best describe as a good guy. There really isn't a lot of depth to his character. Michael is the school's star football player who's set to nab a sports scholarship and all that, but where his struggle comes from is feeling like he has no control of his life and is just doing what others have decided for him. He tries to quit football to chase his real passion of playing the flute and joining the school's music club, but that doesn't work out for him and gives up on playing the flute altogether. This arc encompasses all of 1 episode and has no greater impact on the story. Also, he has powers to see the future. Then we have Kit. On the surface, he looks like a normal high schooler, but is actually a creature called a Painted Skin who works for Chang. At first, his mission is to get close to Gentry in order to steal her powers, but soon warms up to her and goes against the orders of Chang. Kit and his arc in my opinion are the best written parts about the show, which I'll touch on more a bit later. After Kit we have Stella. She and Michael were in a relationship at the start of the series but later broke up because he wasn't sure about his relationship with her. Stella doesn't really get to do much. Her most defining moment is giving Gentry the go-ahead to actually date Michael because she genuinely wants what's best for both of them. It's a shame her character gets shafted like that, but there really isn't much to say about her aside from the fact that she's a perfectionist who has planned out her entire life. Other side characters include Ed, a juncture who was supposed to kill Gentry at the start of the show but switches sides, becoming the somewhat annoying comic relief mascot character. The ghosts that reside in Gentry's house, the conspiracy theorist vice principal who is obsessed with the fire that ravaged the town 8 years ago and spends too much time on Reddit. And yeah, that's just about it. Despite the fact that there might not be a lot of important side characters, the show doesn't really do anything with them. Don't let the incredibly good opening theme fool you. Sure, these characters show up looking like they'll join Gentry in the fight against the Underworld, but nah, most of these characters barely get any screen time with arcs that end up being rushed or incomplete. The writing really does them dirty. And Michael is the prime example of this. Once we find out he has powers to see the future, it gets teased to us bit by bit, so you can't help but wonder where these powers come from and why he has them. A mystery that gets even bigger when you watch his parents react to finding out about it, implying that they know more than they're letting on, but this never gets explained, and the next time we see him, we find out he's gotten better at using them off screen. Are you annoyed? I know I am. That part of him is thrown aside to get into relationship struggles with Gentry. The only side character that actually has a cohesive arc would be Kit. Kit is someone who had spent centuries assuming the identity of different people just to absorb their energy, which in turn killed them. He worked for Cheng because Cheng promised to give him a soul, but it's until he meets and actually falls in love with Gentry that he realizes he's had a soul all along. This change makes him want to reveal everything to Gentry in hopes of being accepted for who he really is, and he does. Unfortunately, in a move that I think was equal parts justified and kind of stupid, Gentry is terrified and wants nothing to do with him. But in the context of the events that led up to this reveal, her reaction was pretty unfair to Kit. Sure, I don't expect her to instantly accept the fact that someone she was in love with and kissed was a century-old monster all along. She does a complete 180 and treats him like shit. Kit does try to make it up to her and genuinely puts in the effort, though at some point he turns into a nice guy who expects to be forgiven because he's doing good now. He goes through a lot and grows, with his arc ending with him sacrificing himself to save Gentry in one last attempt to make things right. Gentry's unfair treatment of Kit is just one of the few things that makes her a protagonist that's actually hard to like. As per the series standard, she's actually pretty well written, but looking at her from a wider lens makes you realize how frustrating watching her can be. Gentry is a character who never really learns her lesson, which is annoying when you have to watch her make the same obviously bad decisions again and again. And to make things even worse, she never really suffers consequences for her actions. In the very second episode, she accidentally reveals to her school that she's the one who burnt down the town, and events that traumatize a lot of people. And the only thing that comes from that is her schoolmates alienating her. You'd think there'd be a lot more buzz around it, but that quickly dies down. It was very jarring. She breaks into the Zhong, which is like purgatory, in an attempt to break her parents out of it and gets caught by the guy who runs the place but is able to escape. But mind you, this guy can appear anywhere, so I don't see why he never went after her again. Then she breaks into the Underworld, DU, to free the Moonware that had been after her life, all in an attempt to get answers about her mother's whereabouts, creates a lot of destruction and chaos, gets temporarily possessed but is able to make it out. However, this gives the Mogwai the chance to take control of the entire place and launch a large-scale attack. Her selfish actions, which have huge ramifications on the world itself, are just swept under the rug, leaving her to get away scot-free. The lack of consequences meant that there weren't really any stakes in the story, which also meant that all the story's tensions felt fabricated, which also meant that a lot of the emotional beats ended up not being as effective as they intended. Like, let's circle back to episode 2, when she revealed she was the one who set the town on fire with her powers. Having this reveal so early on in the story was such a bad move because it meant that whatever story beats that would have come from her living a double life, trying to hide her powers while dealing with the trauma of burning down the town, gets axed immediately, taking away whatever emotional weight that would have come from it. The worst part is, this exact reveal happens again at the end of episode 9, this time being revealed to an even larger crowd. A scene that was meant to be tense but ends up losing its punch because we already saw this happen 7 episodes ago. Adding to the things not making sense is the fact that her schoolmates now look at her with horror this time around. All these problems come from the show's pacing trying to do too much with so little time. Maybe the writers were scared of the show getting canned after one season, as per Netflix's MO, so they forced enough material for 2 seasons into one in hopes that it would give them enough traction to get another season out there, but it ends up being a rushed and jumbled up mess. The final nail in the coffin being the fact that the first arc ends in episode 10, which is a problem. Chang is built up as a threat throughout these 10 episodes so that when he's finally defeated, it gives you a sense of release and completion. It's a season finale through and through. However, after that, the story still goes on for what I can best describe as a 3-episode epilogue that reunites Gentry with her mother, introducing and concluding plot threads in the span of 3 episodes. It doesn't feel as satisfying as you'd think. But you can see the writers trying their best to end things on a good note, as by the end of the final episode, everything is done. It doesn't tease things for a second season or end things on a cliffhanger. It ends in a way that if it got a second season, that would be great, but if it didn't, that would be fine. But it does leave me wondering what they'd do if they did get a second season. They'd probably put Michael in focus and expand on his powers, as well as maybe introduce some new big bad for Gentry to face, but I'm not going to hold my breath for this. All in all, the show was a pretty good one. It was visually appealing with colors that popped and music that, while it was a bit much in some cases, ended up providing a lot of bangers to vibe to. If I was to give the series an overall rating, I'd give it a 6.5. I didn't hate my time watching it, but wished it could have been so much more. Hey, maybe I can get you guys to go watch the series in order to give it some traction and prove to Netflix to invest more into it. It's unlikely, but who knows? Anyway, that's it for this video. Let me know what your thoughts were on Gentry, Chau vs the Underworld, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so that you can stay up to date with new videos I put out. As always, this has been your very favorite slice of bread. Stay toasty.